So as the events of Nutmeg Nor'easter 2024 were winding down, Dylan and I started to get our bikes together because we were heading out on what I consider part 3 of 5 on this East Coast trip. Erin was heading off in her car to the Berkshires. She had a cabin up there. She was going to do some hiking and biking and meeting a friend. Ben was taking off on his 700-mile journey by bike back to Ohio, and Dylan and I were heading to New London to catch the ferry to Long Island, where we would be camping that night. Our ultimate destination for this part of the trip was Queens in New York City, where we had an Airbnb booked. We had the benefit of being able to leave a bunch of gear with Erin in her car, so basically we took another look at the weather and decided what we needed to bring. There was almost no chance of rain, so I left certain things like the rain cape and some other things I had talked about in previous videos with Erin, and tried to pack as minimally as I could, but having enough stuff to be warm because the riding days were going to be nice, but the evenings were going to be a little cold. We would be camping 2 nights overall. The route took us back through Chester, which Nutmeg Nor'easter goes through. I was looking around a bit because I knew Ames and Brad and Mikey and Erin were all meeting there for lunch, but I didn't see them sitting on any porches or anything like that. We were trying to keep moving. We also went through Deep River, Connecticut. Our roads were okay. They weren't the best. I was trying to take us on roads that weren't the same as Nutmeg Nor'easter to get those new miles in. I always talk about the app Wanderer. I like to fill in the map, just different places you ride, kind of like Strava heat maps. But also it was a little bit more direct because we had 37 miles to get to New London, and then I think we had an additional 38 miles before we would get to our campground after taking the ferry. When we got to this part, I was a little confused. I thought to myself, I don't remember having a bike path this early in the ride. What it actually was, though, was access to the bridge over the Connecticut River. I've never ridden a bridge over the Connecticut River. Every time I've been in this area, we've taken the ferry from over by Gillette Castle. Both experiences are cool. I always love a ferry, but this bridge had really, really neat views from way up here. This route had some cool views as we were heading kind of towards Old Saybrook, which I've spent some time in a couple years ago. So some cool water views and stuff like that. There are actually dirt routes that would mirror this. As always, I'll have the Strava link below, but no, if you're researching this or if you're a local, we know there are different ways and better ways to go. Like I said, we were trying to split the difference between riding new roads and getting there in a reasonable amount of time. So that might have made it that we were kind of traveling the more well-traveled route, which again, there's shoulders and stuff like that. It was still pretty fall color, still water views, but there are routes that could be a little better, I'm sure. We did not reserve a ferry to cross the Long Island Sound because we didn't know exactly when we'd be getting there, and I figured on a Sunday it shouldn't be a problem. I mean, that was just a wild guess. But as I was looking at the clock, I was like, maybe we could make that 3 o'clock ferry. I couldn't remember if they left every half an hour or if they left every hour. So I was like, man, if we get there like 5 minutes after 3 o'clock and miss that ferry, it would be a real bummer. So we were trying to ride at a pretty good pace. I was trying to keep up with Dylan. He is such a stronger rider than I am. So, and we still had some hills in here. I think, we had a few thousand feet of elevation on the day. So I was just really, really pushing it. Already a little bit tired from having ridden Nutmeg the day before. But I knew I wanted to do my best to try and make it. When we were hitting the outskirts of New London, I was watching the time tick down and I was starting to get less hopeful. I was still making my video and I was still taking in all the sights, but I was really trying to keep moving. The city did look pretty cool. There was a lot of stuff there. I'm wondering if it's kind of a summerist touristy town. Anyone who's from the area, let me know. When we arrived at the ferry terminal, I asked where we go to get the tickets. I went in and I asked the lady if we could make it. She said, hey, the ferry's still there, so these tickets will work no matter what. We rolled up and nobody was really helping us. Dylan was like, let's just try and roll up even more. And we did, and finally someone was like, yeah, go ahead. We're like, what do we do with the bikes? And they were like, lean them against the wall. We leaned the bikes and wedged them pretty good, so they hopefully would not be falling over or anything like that. I was so happy to be on the boat. One, that we caught the right one. You know, this would mean less time riding after dark on this trip. And then I was just so happy to be on this. This idea I originally had after we did the first nutmeg. Me and Ben did a little credit card tour of Connecticut, and we ended in Bridgeport where Aaron picked us up after visiting a friend. And I saw the ferries leaving there, looked them up, and saw that they went to Long Island. So later I looked up that there was one from New London to Orient Point, which is this ferry. Orient Point is the northwestern tip of Long Island. That's where we'd be heading. So me and Dylan really spent the time kind of exploring the ferry. It was a little chilly up there. You could see I threw on my puffer coat. We walked around on the top deck, looked around, took some photos. Then I saw that they had a bar, so I had to grab myself a beer. They had all kinds of craft beer. They had football on in there. There are areas on the ferry to work. There's cafe areas. I don't know. It was just really cool. You know, it's one of the things, I don't live in this area. I don't live near the ocean or these big sounds, so this stuff is very novel to me. There was a point where a bunch of people had run outside. I was wondering what was happening, so I went out there too. Turns out there were dolphins out there. So I only saw them in the distance. I didn't get any photos or footage, but I just saw them as they were kind of going away from the boat. It was a real maze to get off that boat. Those cars get really packed on there. So just walking back to our bikes was a challenge. It felt like we were riding in Brooklyn, which you'll get to see in a future video. This ride over 2 days was about 160 miles. This would be a trip that would be easy to break up into more days, almost as many days as you wanted, because we didn't go out to the lighthouse at Orient Point. Like I said, we didn't explore New London. I did make this route on Long Island different than what Strava and Google Maps and everything recommended to make it a little more to what I wanted to see. This first part here, we did go up by the water a little more, and then we cut across and down by the Long Island Sound on the other side. So that was all planned and added some extra miles. Later in the trip on the next day, you'll see that I have us hit some bike paths and things like that. But that's kind of what I wanted to do, was mix in some sightseeing, but still be getting there. So we weren't like, you know, got good views from the bikes, but we definitely were not chilling. So I'm told that the southern side of Long Island is where the Hamptons and things like that are, and it's much more built up and crowded. Where we were riding up here was much more vineyards and wineries and some houses here and there, but way more chill farms. So this evening ride was really, really beautiful. We cut through a couple subdivisions, but in general, it was farm fields, and then we had this awesome sunset. Coming up here in a little bit again, you'll see we have views of the water behind the houses. So I was really happy with this first day route on Long Island. As mentioned, Dylan's just a much stronger rider than I am, so he pretty much was on the front the whole 2 days. I would say that he was probably riding a little easier than he would normally ride, and I was probably riding a little harder than I would normally ride. I think my packing wasn't quite as felt and light as his, but it wouldn't have mattered. Even if we switched bikes, he would still be that much faster than I am. It's always so cool when you've been planning a route somewhere you've never been before to see those little lines on the maps and those little things you're drawing come to life. So I was really stoked. I thought it was really fun. Even on these bigger roads you could see here, which are part of the bicycle route, they have these giant shoulders. I think you could just kind of take this road for a long way, but I had modified the route again to take us to the coast and onto these more chill country roads that you could see here. Also, the sunset was just so stunning. I actually stopped to take a couple photos. We were discussing whether we wanted to stop for dinner or not, but then we were getting tired and we decided we better. So we stopped at this little Mexican restaurant. It was really, really good. We were both really glad that we made that decision instead of going all the way to camp and making our meals, even though it did mean the rest of the ride was in the dark. Our campsite was the Peconic River Campground. It's on Hip Camp. That's where I found them, so it's a private campground. Obviously, we didn't even know what we were really setting up at in the evening, but it turned out to be a pretty spot in the morning. If we had gotten earlier, the other side of that road you see there is more wooded. Probably would have camped over on that side, but there were not a lot of people out here. So I made my coffee, took a little walk over by this water area. It also says that across the street they have some dirt trails that you're allowed to ride bikes on. Obviously, this trip wasn't going to be one where we'd be exploring it because today was an 87-mile day the rest of the way down Long Island. It had been a pretty chilly night. I actually had to get fully into my sleeping bag. I slept with my tights on. I also used my down jacket over my feet. They were a little chilly from the evening ride, and then I pulled it up over me later in the evening. I stayed warm enough, but I definitely, every time I shuffled around, would get a chill and would have to get myself back into a warm situation. Where we're cutting through right here is something I had seen on Google Maps. I dropped that little guy down that gives you the street view, and I saw that this gate was open. I was hoping it was going to be open on this day. I saw these bike paths through here, and I was kind of confused why they were fenced off. But anyways, that gate on Google Maps was open in real life as well, and I'm glad because you could see these are pretty cool trails through here. They kind of go around an airport, and I think someone told me the airport might not be open anymore. I'm not sure. But this was a little gamble I took on Strava, and it totally paid off. So to talk about the route and riding Long Island in general a little more, I had talked to a number of people at Nutmeg about that this is what we were doing, so a number of the locals. A number of people had said the ride down Long Island isn't that great and not that many people like it. Well, Strava and Google Maps tried to send us right down the center of Long Island. That's not really what I was out here for, so I modified the route to the north. Again, I had been told that it was less populated up there and a little more chill, but I also found 2 long stretches of bike paths besides that one we were just on. So I felt like this seems like a better idea, especially as we get farther and farther and closer to New York City. It's going to get built up and a little more intense riding. I thought it'd be fun to be on bike paths for a little bit where you get that kind of just mindless where you just ride, you know where you're going. So here you can see we've hit that bike path. Also, so on that topic, I would love for any of the people who, I know I have friends who live on Long Island, but just the friends from Connecticut and other people who have done Long Island rides, to look at our route. Let me know what you think. I think definitely we did a good job. I think me and Dylan were saying 85 to 90% of the route was really good. This was just a little cut that we saw on the map, went straight, the bike path curved around. We're like, gotta hit the dirt, right? Dylan could see on his Garmin, and at different parts on the trail, we could just see there were all these trails around us. That's another thing I'd be interested from any locals to know. I think I know that some other YouTubers from New York I follow have come up here and done some riding. It does look like there would be some off-road stuff to explore up here. They look like they might be those kind of gray area trails where they're not official, but maybe they're not totally private property. Again, let me know if you know the answer to that. We were back out on the road for just a little bit before we hit the second bike path. This bike path was different. It was curvy, it was hilly. I didn't realize how much elevation there was on Long Island, so even though this wasn't a super climby day, it was definitely not a flat day. I think we ended up with 3,000 feet. Again, the Strava will be linked below if you want to dive into the route. So if anyone wanted to know if I would do this over again, I would. It's something I'd wanted to do for a long time. I've never seen Long Island. I enjoyed getting to see the area. I think our route turned out pretty good. I was a little surprised, as you'll see in some coming sections, about how just typical suburban certain parts of Long Island are. You know, houses that look like they were built in maybe the 80s or 90s, but just typical subdivisions. I don't know. For some reason, that wasn't what I had in my head, but I know that's probably different than like the old money and stuff like that on the southern side of the island. But I'm sure just like any part of the country, a lot of these subdivisions are former farm fields and, you know, are just getting developed. And for some reason, I just figured New York, Long Island, it would be different and everything would be a little older. When we hit this section, we assumed this must be damage from Hurricane Helene. Again, if anyone knows, let me know, but the road had completely collapsed on this sand here. Turned out our detour wasn't too bad, just had kind of a steep hill on it. I don't know if that would have been avoidable if we went the way that we had planned. This section of road right here too was still pretty, and it was up and down and we were able to bomb around, but I don't know if it was just the time of day it was, because these school buses just kept passing us and there was a lot of traffic for a little while. So even though we were on a really pretty road for a few miles section, it wasn't the most fun, and I think that probably was just a time of day thing. I assume this train here is the Long Island Railroad. It was funny because I did think in the back of my mind, man, if I completely get burned out, I guess I do have a way to bail out on this ride. I did make it the whole way. I'm not going to lie. I was pushing it a little bit the whole way and I was tired by the end. The weight of the bike and all the riding we had done and riding a little faster, as I mentioned, just by the time we were at this point having lunch at this Greek restaurant, when we hit hills, I had kind of just lost all my steam. One thing about myself is I could pretty much ride forever. That's how I feel. I just end up going slower on climbs. We were talking about how sometimes construction makes these great unintentional bike lanes. That was definitely a plus here. We started to ride along a freeway. I can't remember if that was it's not the BQE, whatever. Like I said, it's on the map, but this section just sucked. There's no other way to put it. There would be a shoulder sometimes, but then that shoulder would go away. This is what is marked kind of as the route on Google Maps and Strava that people take. Anyways, it was no fun there for a little bit, and like I've always said in my videos, I have no problem jumping on a sidewalk when I feel uncomfortable. Once we actually got into the city proper though, I think this is into Queens already here, we saw the bike lane, and this was a thank God. As you can see, I didn't film a lot of that last section because it just was, it's getting late in the day and I was just trying to get it done. So yeah, this was such a relief to be in the city where I love riding in New York. I think it's easy to ride in New York, and yeah, just a better experience. Right here we're passing Cunningham Park, which actually has mountain bike trails. This is something we had considered coming back and doing the next day, but instead we ended up heading just more into the city and doing more New York riding. As we rode into Queens too, and I've looked at the map again now, we also could have diverted a little bit to the north and gone through Casina, I believe that's how it's pronounced, where the velodrome is, and there's kind of a green ribbon there that would have taken you through Flushing Meadows Park. If you've seen the end of Men in Black, that's where it takes place, the big World Sphere globe. It's this bridge, I think we're actually kind of cutting across that area, because when I looked out there, I could see those observatories that they used as the original spaceships in Men in Black. So yeah, big day out on the bike, but it was a lot of fun. Totally worth it. We got to our Airbnb, got checked in, and then we just ended up walking out to dinner and coming home and crashing because we were going to be hitting the road early in the morning for a full day of New York City riding. That is going to be the next video in this series. I'm excited to put it together. Like I said, absolutely love bombing around New York City on my bike. The sights, the bridges, everything about it. So I will see you in that video. Thanks as always for watching. If you like this kind of content, give this video that thumbs up and also consider becoming a channel member. That is all linked down below. I will see you in the next one. Peace.